There's a new documentary landing on Shine TV tomorrow, Tuesday, the 15th of April, and it's called Our Arranged Marriage. And it's a follow on from the original Gloria Vale story that Shine screened last year. It follows the story of Zion and Gloriana, who were born into the reclusive Gloria Vale community, their arranged marriage, subsequently being excommunicated, and a story really of reclaiming faith, hope, and love for themselves. Joining me on the program on Sanctuary today is producer Dave Mann of the film from Shining Light Trust. Kia ora and welcome, Dave. Good to see you.
Kia ora, Lizzie.
Hey, so I've watched this doco. I really enjoyed it. 30 minutes and it packs a big punch. Was it sort of hard for you guys to trim it down to that time frame?
Yeah, the story actually originally, I was down in Timaru and staying with a friend while visiting pastors groups traveling around the country. And he introduced me to one of his friends, which was Zion, who'd come out of Gloria Vale.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, hanging out at his house, it was just like, this is such a powerful story. And Zion carried no malice. It was just complete grace given the background. And so I actually just boldly asked him, could we create a 5-minute story? And anyway, long story short is the first interview with him went for an hour 15, and that got cut down to the first 25-minute video. And we're now about 2 years on from that. And his wife, really coming up to their 25th wedding anniversary. Same scenario again. I think the interview was well over 1 hour, and we could have done a 50-minute. So yes, it's challenging to get the story shorter sometimes, but it definitely packs a punch.
It does.
And I think that what's most striking to me with this couple all the way through is their grace.
Yes.
That they aren't vindictive, they aren't out to pull anyone down. They're not, the typical media story always has a victim, a villain, and a hero. They aren't playing the victim. They aren't trying to paint Gloria Vale entirely as the villain. They are instead saying they're in some ways victims of their own thinking, and they would desire to actually see things changed. So yeah, truly powerful. And yeah, 25 minutes, it packs a punch for what's in that.
Yeah, you're so right in what you've just explained. That's something that we picked up from watching it, me and another colleague actually, of, like you say, they seem to have so much grace. They're this sort of almost like sticking to the facts. This is what happened. This is how we responded. And really beautiful, but there's obviously an element of forgiveness in there, right? To have that kind of attitude.
Yeah, and I mean the people that show on the video are all their wider family, and so they've all seen the video before it's come out. The fuzzed out faces are obviously those for whom we didn't get permission. But I mean, Zion talks in the first of the two videos that we made at that length about his own training to be a junior leader at Gloria Vale. And his wife wanted him to. This was the right thing to do, to be a godly man doing what you're told by those above you. But that meant he ended up participating, and he talks about it in the excommunication of his own brother-in-law. And as a part of that, the marriage covenant required that you be committed to the community first, because the community is called the church, and you're committed to your spouse second. And so I think the grace in some ways comes from the fact that they've been right involved in that system, believing everything they've been told, even through to the shame of having participated in the cutting off of their own family members, while the pennies slowly dropped that everything that they believed was something they'd been fed by somebody else. And then their discovery that the scriptures really don't carry those same values. So, yeah, I mean, I think they have a reason to be humble, and they still love people in the community. They're their family members. And so their desire is to bring hope rather than condemnation.
Yeah. So in the story, it talks of that, I think with Zion, he travelled for work and he started to get other information and hear perhaps some other preaching or something like that. And his wife, she became very concerned because he started to change, right? And in the story, it talks about how she writes a letter that I don't think she actually ever shares with anyone, does she? But she writes this letter that she's concerned about her husband and how he's changing. And he was starting to have some revelation of who God was for him, right? That's so powerful.
Yeah, he was one of the few who was given external work, trained in accountancy, became a Air New Zealand pilot, and then took on another career as a hunting guide. and that put him into conferences over in America. But that gave him access to a phone and to internet, and then he starts listening to what most of us would still consider very conservative Christian preachers.
Yeah.
Some of us might not still listen even to them in terms of the spectrum of things. But yeah, discovering the grace of God, and one of the key moments for him, I think it was a Hutterite community that he visited, and they had a whole different set of rules. Now, I remember him explaining this to me. So if you just imagine, one might permit some alcohol, but the other says you cannot have alcohol at all. One says you have to dress this way, another that way, and suddenly this comparison between all these secondary rules that they've all got and they're living under. Here were two completely different sets of secondary rules, and yet these other people were in every way as godly as he had ever been. But yes, his wife, Gloriana, she certainly became suspicious of him because her number one goal for him, she admits, was that he would comply with everything that the church said, and the church, in inverted commas, meant the Gloria Vale community. So, but yeah, she eventually, I think she felt quite guilty doing so, but she listened to a sermon from someone from outside the community that he showed her. And it was then that, her own words, she says, everything in it was truth. There was nothing in it she could disagree, and the penny begins to drop. Why are we so shut off? Why do we think ourselves superior
Yeah.
to others?
Yeah. And so, there's lots of other stories of families coming out from Gloria Vale. Well, some
Mm.
stories that we hear. What sort of support is there for these families that decide to leave the community?
Yeah, the Gloria Vale Leavers Trust is actually based in Timaru. Um, And so when most people come out of that community, they have never used a bank account before. They've never used a credit card, a debit card, an EFTPOS card. They just don't know how the systems work. Most of them wouldn't have a New Zealand driver's license. They've discovered their marriage certificates aren't recognised by the government. And so they have to address that. So yeah, for most coming out, it's really quite scary. But there is a whole community of people that support them, and locals over on the coast, but then people in other parts of the country. When they first left, and Zion mentioned that he was going to challenge the leadership on some things with a letter, one of their friends jokingly had laughed to him and said, "We'll find you a house." In other words, I can see where this is going, even if you can't. So yeah, the Glory of Our Leavers Trust do an absolutely fantastic work. I think what's special about Zion and Gloriana is just their humble continuance and faith in God. Many people leaving a community where there is, I would say it's manipulation, even if it's unknowingly so,
Yeah.
would feel bitter toward those they then looked back and realized, oh, we were manipulated.
Sure.
In this instance, they don't. And in leaving a Christian sect, or a controlling Christian community, they have continued in the Christian faith.
Yeah, that's
And so
beautiful.
yeah. So I think they're really, to me, they're like elder statesmen. They're like mother and father figures, who can bring encouragement to others who leave. That just because you're leaving Gloria Vale, it doesn't mean you have to leave Christ. And in
Amen.
fact, a greater fullness of what it means to be a Christian can be found in the leaving.
Yeah, that's so powerful. So highly recommend watching this documentary. It's tomorrow night on Shine TV, 7:30 p.m. Our Arranged Marriage. That timing doesn't work for you. Tomorrow will also be on Shine on Demand. Dave Mann, congrats again, and thank you for your time today.
Cool. Thanks, Lizzie.